Hey guys! Tonight we begin with a topic a little less philosophical and a lot more greasy. Medieval junk food. Yes, even in a world without fast food chains, vending machines, or hot dog carts, people still found ways to snack. But here's a question most history videos won't ask. What did a medieval peasant eat when they wanted something quick, cheap, and delicious? And why was it often fried in pig fat? What if I told you the first donuts weren't American? And that medieval people had their own version of a hot pocket? Before we travel back in time, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Little Historical, but only if you genuinely enjoy strange, forgotten history. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Because what you're about to discover might make you grateful for your next trip to the drive-thru. You have to understand, the medieval hand pie wasn't food you admired. It was food you survived on, and sometimes you barely survived the eating of it. Picture a crust so thick and so rigid that bakers called it coffin paste, not as a joke, but as an honest description of its purpose. It was a vessel, a container, an edible box designed to carry something mysterious and often meat-based from a dirty stall to your hungry mouth without falling apart along the way. But here is where the story gets strangely intimate. Because you never really knew what you were biting into, the vendor wouldn't tell you, and you wouldn't ask. That was the unspoken agreement between you, the baker, and the dark, warm pocket he placed in your palm. Inside, there could be chopped mutton, yes, but also eel, pigeon, rabbit, or whatever had been cheap that morning at the market. Sometimes, if the cook had been careless or the week had been hard, the filling held things you were better off not identifying. A stringy texture here, an unexpected crunch there, and yet you kept eating. Because hunger has a way of silencing curiosity. That is the secret of the medieval hand pie. It wasn't just fast food. It was a gamble wrapped in dough, a small, hot wager you made with your stomach every time you handed over a coin. And the most unsettling part? People loved them. Children begged for them. Workers lined up before sunrise. Monks bought them outside monastery gates and ate them in silence, pretending not to enjoy the greasy warmth spreading through their fingers. There was something almost forbidden about the pleasure, something that felt slightly wrong in a world where the church preached moderation and self-denial. But the hand pie didn't care about sermons. It was salty, fatty, hot, and secretly addictive. You didn't eat it with a knife or a spoon. You used your hands. You felt the crust crack. You watched the steam escape, and for a few glorious moments, you forgot about the cabbage stew waiting at home, the leaky roof, the aching back from working the fields. The pie gave you nothing but a full belly and a quiet, guilty satisfaction. And in medieval life, that was enough. But the hand pie was only the beginning. Because while you were wiping grease from your chin, someone else was frying something far sweeter, just a few stalls away. Something that would make you forget all about meat and mystery. Something that would lead us straight to the medieval donut. And just like that, from the shadows of the meat pie stall, your nose catches something else, something sweeter, something dangerous in a completely different way. Because while the hand pie was about survival and salty secrets, the medieval fritter was about desire. Pure, hot, unapologetic desire for sugar, for fat, for that brief, golden moment when fried dough touches your tongue and nothing else in the world matters. You have to imagine a small iron pot bubbling over a charcoal fire, filled with tallow that has been reused so many times it has taken on a dark, mysterious personality of its own. Into that pot, the cook drops lumpy handfuls of batter wrapped around chopped apples, small tart things that were probably stolen from a neighbor's tree the night before. The batter itself is simple: flour, eggs, and sometimes ale instead of water, because ale made everything feel slightly more reckless. But here is where the intrigue deepens. When those fritters rise to the surface, golden brown and glistening, the cook does something that feels almost flirtatious. If you have coin and you smile just right, she might dust them with a pinch of imported sugar. A luxury so expensive, it was practically a social signal. A sugared fritter said something about you. It said you had taste. It said you had means. It said you were willing to spend a little extra for something that wouldn't last. A fleeting, edible whisper of indulgence. For everyone else, a drizzle of honey or a sprinkle of spiced syrup had to suffice. And it did suffice, because even without the sugar, that first bite was a small act of rebellion. Crispy edges gave way to a soft, almost tender center. The apple inside, hot and sour and sweet, all at once, burst against your teeth. And for a moment, you understood why people put up with medieval life. The mud, the bad water, the constant ache of hard work. It was all worth it for this. But here is the unsettling truth they didn't tell you in church. The fritter was addictive in a way that felt slightly sinful. You didn't eat just one. You went back for another. You watched the cook's hands as she dropped the batter into the fat. You memorized her rhythm, and you began to crave that hot, sweet, greasy pleasure at odd hours, after Mass, before bed, in the middle of a long afternoon when you should have been working. That is what medieval junk food did to you. It made you weak, and you didn't care. But just when you thought fried apples were the peak of medieval sweetness, a different kind of snack was waiting in the shadows, one that wasn't fried at all, but somehow felt even more forbidden. Something that squeaked when you bit it and left you feeling both satisfied and strangely guilty. That is where we go next, to the strange, quiet pleasure of the medieval cheese curd. You have just surrendered to the sweetness of a hot fritter, your fingers still glistening with honey and tallow, when a different scent cuts through the smoke of the fry stall. It is not sweet. It is not even particularly inviting. It is the smell of old milk, of earth, of something that has been left alone in a dark cellar to become whatever it wants to become. That is the cheese curd. And make no mistake, the cheese curd is not here to impress you. It is not golden. It is not crispy. It does not glisten. It sits in a wooden bowl, pale and lumpy and strangely quiet, like a secret that has not decided whether to tell itself. But here is the thing about the medieval cheese curd. It understands patience. While the fritter screams for attention and the hand pie hides its mysteries behind a wall of crust, the curd simply waits. And when you finally pick one up, slightly cool, slightly damp, and pop it into your mouth, something unexpected happens. It squeaks against your teeth. A soft, high-pitched protest, as if the curd itself is surprised to be eaten. That squeak is not a flaw. It is a promise. It means the curd is fresh, or as fresh as anything could be in a world without refrigeration. It means the farmer who made it knew what he was doing, separating milk into curds and whey using, rennet from the stomach of a baby animal, pressing the results lightly, salting them, and then walking away as if nothing special had occurred. But you know better, because the more you chew, the more the curd reveals itself. It is not dramatic. It does not explode with flavor. It simply fills your mouth with a clean, salty, milky presence that feels almost intimate, like a shared secret between you and the cow. And here is where the tension hides. Cheese curds were not glamorous. Nobles did not serve them at banquets. But everyone else ate them. Monks, travelers, children, lovers sneaking food in dark corners. They were portable, durable, and weirdly satisfying in a way that felt private. You did not talk about cheese curds. You just ate them, one after another, while pretending not to enjoy the quiet squeak, the gentle chew, The way they made you feel, both nourished and slightly ashamed of how many you had consumed. That is the genius of the medieval cheese curd. It asks nothing of you. It performs no tricks. It simply exists, humble and unbothered, while you slowly lose control. But just when you think you understand medieval snacking, when you think it is all about pies and fritters and strange little curds, someone hands you a cup of something warm and dark and surprisingly intoxicating. And that is when you realize medieval people did not just eat their junk food, they drank it too. So let us fill our cups and discover the strange, secret world of ale, soaked bread and wine, soaked sops. You have been chewing, swallowing, wiping grease from your fingers, and yet something still feels unfinished. The fritter gave you sweetness. The hand pie gave you mystery. The cheese curd gave you that strange, private squeak against your teeth. But now, as the afternoon light fades and the medieval market begins to chill, you realize you are thirsty. Not for water, because water in a medieval town was a gamble you only took when absolutely desperate. No, you are thirsty for something darker, something warmer, something that blurs the line between food and drink and leaves you feeling both comforted and slightly unsteady. That is where the sop enters the story. And the sop, you must understand, is not a proud food. It is the result of someone looking at yesterday's bread, the kind that could crack a tooth or double as a building material, and deciding to surrender. You take that bread, stale and stubborn, and you push it down into a bowl of warm ale. Not the cheerful ale you might imagine, but flat, low alcohol, brewed in someone's smoky back room with the hygiene standards of a very forgiving barn. The bread absorbs the liquid like a reluctant sponge, softening, swelling, transforming from a weapon into something almost edible. And here is the intimate secret no cookbook will tell you. Eating a sop feels slightly wrong in a way that is hard to name. The bread is too soft. The ale is too bitter. Your fingers sink into the mush, and you lift it to your lips, and for a moment, you are not sure if you are eating or drinking or simply giving in to something you cannot control. Peasants ate this because they had no choice. But the wealthy made it worse. They took fine bread and soaked it in spiced wine, warm and fragrant, sometimes sweetened with honey or dotted with dried fruit. They called it elegant. They ate it slowly, with spoons, while pretending not to notice how closely it resembled the slop they fed to their dogs. That is the uncomfortable tension of the medieval sop. It is humble and decadent at the same time. It is a confession of hunger wrapped in a bowl of liquid. And once you start eating it, you cannot stop. The warmth spreads through your chest. The ale loosens your thoughts. The wine makes you bold. You dip again and again until the bowl is empty and your lips are stained, and you are not entirely sure if you have just eaten dinner or committed a small, delicious sin. But the medieval snack cart is not finished with you yet, because while you were busy sopping up the last drops of that dark, spiced liquid, someone beside you reached for something small, hard, and frighteningly sweet. Something that could crack your teeth and freshen your breath and leave you wanting more all at once. That is where we go next, into the strange, crunchy world of medieval candy.